Welcome to the College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line. Here's Shehan J. Haraja and Bobak Hayeri.
Hey everybody, it's the College Football Survivor Show. I'm Bobak Hayeri with my co-host Shehan J. Haraja, national college football writer for CBS Sports. We are glad to have you with us. Last episode, we gave our 12-team playoff bracket predictions. Today, we're going to take a closer look and break down the inaugural first-round games that are landing this weekend. But before we get to it, let me remind you that you can find us on X and TikTok at CFP Survivor Show, where we have video highlights of the show, run polls, and listen to your feedback. Take a moment if you can. Like, rate, and subscribe. Write a review. We enjoy it all. All right. Well, it seems like, we recorded our last episode quite literally yesterday. So this is all fresh in our minds. We went through the whole bracket. But as Sean was cautioning throughout the episode, we're going to get a little bit more in depth today. This is fun. It's bowl week. There was actually a bowl game last night, the Frisco Bowl, which, was actually kind of close in the end.
Right down the road from me. But I assure you, I was busy going to sleep.
See, I thought you were in one of those coffee costumes, like the two mascots that were running around. Like, we wouldn't even know. Like, that's like, instead of a superhero, your alter ego is being an anthropomorphized coffee. But for Frisco, not for Frisco, for Scooter's Coffee.
Scooter's Coffee. Yeah, we love ourselves some coffee. I don't know that Scooter's is specifically the place that we would go to in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. But no, and I will say too, like West Virginia made it way more of a game than I thought that they would. I thought that especially their defense would have some struggles against Seth Hennigan and that Memphis offense. But it turns out, Memphis was able to come through. I do think that Memphis covered, which was my pick on when I went on our HQ show last week. So I feel okay about that. But it did end up being closer than expected. And did you see that last sequence with the fumble and then oh my god,
it was an interception, then a fumble, but then they ruled that the defender was sliding. And that killed the game for West Virginia. Yeah, that was just absolutely wild. I have to say, I was blown away by C.J. Donaldson, the running back for West Virginia. There was this one moment where he scored, and even on that broadcast saying, wow, he just left it all out there. And I'm like, okay, that's a saying. But then they showed him like going off the field, taking off his helmet and collapsing, like from exhaustion. Like he was okay. And then a few minutes later, they showed him and he was just on the bench. But,
my gosh.
Who says bowl? I hate people that say bowls don't matter. That matters to these kids. They're putting it all out there.
Oh, yeah.
I remember.
Well, and I will say too. I'm hopeful that they're able to hold on to C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White, because those two guys, especially Jaheim White, I'll say, absolutely perfect for a Rich Rod offense. Like I really hope we get to see them in that.
Yeah, absolutely. They would fit in that, and his the way he loves to approach it, and my goodness, yeah, that was a good one. I have to say also the other thing, Ryan Silverfield, they showed before the game his pregame speech. And the way he was talking about it, and I know coaches are it's an art form and that's part of what makes a good coach, but his motivational speech, which they included, it sounded like they were getting ready to go out there. They even said championship, because it is, you win you're the champions of the Frisco Bowl, but my goodness. And then I'm sure that was the sweetest iced coffee bath. Thank goodness iced coffee bath at the end. My goodness. I love this silliness. I just think the Gasparilla Bowl, which I'm going to be out on Friday, just announced they're going to have a pirate on scene. Like,
Is it you?
No. I did paint my nails black, but I'm gonna be there in kind of the quasi rocker, the fatter Johnny Depp approach to all of this. But anyway, so those aren't the bowls we're going to be talking about. Although the Gasparilla leads into the first bowl, which it is interesting that they decided to put one on Friday night and three on Saturday. Time-wise, it makes sense. It's hard to get more than 3 games where you expect people to watch all 3 of them, which most people are going to try to do, no matter what other sporting events are happening on Saturday.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. I do want to ask real quick. Do you know what the high was yesterday in Dallas for the Scooters Frisco Bowl? Do you know what the temperature was?
It had to have been hotter than where I was here in Minneapolis. It's all I know.
71.
Oh my gosh.
71, which is frankly outrageous. Like, I am getting very sick of this. Now we're down to like 50 right now, which is beautiful weather, of course. But like, we had a little bit of a heat wave yesterday. I walked out of the house wearing a sweater, not because I thought it was cold, but because it's like winter.
Fashionable.
And, yeah, exactly. And it's like, what I need to be wearing a t-shirt and shorts right now.
Yeah, I mean, some of these teams are going to wish they were playing in places like the Gasparilla Bowl because it's like 70. I checked, game day is going to be like 70 degrees. Tomorrow is 77. I'm going to be honest, everybody, that is at the edge of my comfort zone. I prefer a nice
Yeah.
60, 65, especially I'm not
Yeah.
like on the beach. But yeah, no.
60 to 65 is perfect weather.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we settle into that today in Dallas.
Fantastic. Well, let's get to the first game. So again, on Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern local time. For the record, it isn't just 8 p.m. Eastern. No, they're kicking off at 8 p.m. We have the championship of Indiana, number 10 Indiana, at Notre Dame. It's going to be great, wonderful look. Supposed to be a little bit of potential snow, but not too bad, especially for these teams. As we've said, the two teams that seem to be potentially facing any snow during the game are teams that are used to it. So it should be a fairly even matched game in the sense of being used to the weather. Now, beyond that, there's a lot of kind of fun, just sort of generalities to this. I mean, even though they're in the same state, it's been mentioned before, the last time they played, 1991, Notre Dame won that game 49-27 to open that season. And then before that, I didn't realize this, before that, they hadn't played since 1958. So even though they say, Indiana last beat Notre Dame in 1950, it's like they only played probably a handful of times since then. Although the Irish have won almost all the games. It's like 22-3 Irish. But now, no doubt this has got to be the biggest game in the history of these two teams playing each other. There's just no other. I'm sure, okay, maybe somebody will dig up like there was who knows. But at this point, in the modern era of college football, I'm saying this is the biggest game they've ever had. We're going to have a really interesting matchup here. Obviously, there's an efficient passing attack. You got a great offense. It's behind Miami in scoring, and only Oregon has a better offense on third downs in the Big Ten. Really excited to see Curtis Rourke, really excited to see all of this. And I know we want to break down what are some of the keys to this game, but how is your overarching what's got you most intrigued about this one as we head into it?
Well, these are two teams that have done a sensational job of controlling their game scripts, I would argue. They both, I think, get off to good starts. They both have high success rates when you talk about their offenses, especially. Actually, Indiana, by the way, has the number one offensive success rate in the country, which is crazy, right? But I think that these are two really, really well coached teams. And that gets thrown out a little bit, I think, as a cliche at times. But I mean this in the most literal sense. They know where they want to be, they know how they want to approach the game. Their players do not panic, they make good decisions. Again, really the only true blip between these two teams is Notre Dame coming out a little too hair on fire against NIU and struggling to adjust to the moment, right? And that was bad. That was really bad, obviously. But since then, I think that you've seen Notre Dame grow so much since then. Indiana's been that team all year. Even in that game that they lost to Ohio State, I don't feel like they ever just lost themselves in it either. I mean, they just kind of were physically overmatched. And that's certainly something I'm going to be keeping an eye on with this game is, will Notre Dame be able to physically overmatch Indiana in a way that kind of overcomes their really quality play overall? And look, you mentioned obviously potential for snow, very, very cold. I don't think that it's certainly going to be a thing that decides the game, but I do wonder if it's something that plays into Notre Dame's style of play more than Indiana's, because Indiana has a really, really good quarterback in Curtis Rourke, who, by the way, is Canadian. I don't think he's going to be scared of the cold by any means, but I do think that it can impact how consistent, how efficient, how effective your passing game is when it is cold outside versus a running game tends to thrive in those elements because you are physically punishing a defense. It's kind of north-south movement versus east-west movement. I think the east-west movement kind of gets a little bit I think that it suffers more when it's cold outside just because of the physical movement of it. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I open this, but I don't know. What are your first thoughts on this game?
I like the fact that you pointed out early on that these are teams that pace well, they have good tempo, they plan out themselves, but the concern that kind of popped to mind in that Ohio State game for Indiana is at one point, their script once they got through their scripted drives, things started to fall apart. Now,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
may be, and I'm sure Kurt Cignetti would admit this too. I mean, that team rose so fast, so quickly, so unexpectedly to everyone other than like a handful of real diehards, and probably on the team as well. I bet half the players were
I'm
like,
pretty sure that even the diehards were like, "We're gonna win 8 this year. It's gonna be crazy."
yeah, remember when 9 Windiana was like the meme, and then it just sort of like fell to the wayside? My goodness.
I literally don't think that anybody outside of maybe Kurt Cignetti thought that they had any chance to win 11. Like I think that even the players on the roster were like, "Ooh, wouldn't that be cool to finish 7-5? That would have been such a great improvement over last season." Though I will say too, he brought over a bunch of James Madison players who do not like to lose and are not used to losing. So I think that probably was a huge culture component. The fact that he brought over guys who just knew how to play the right way, were well coached, were familiar with the staff. But I think that even in the most optimistic sense, it was like, we're going to definitely make a bowl game.
So when they got into that second half, I think they were just a little lost. At that point, they kind of had they'd overshot a little bit, and they were kind of now. I'm hoping if for a competitive game, Indiana will be able to they'll probably be more than likely have learned from that Ohio State game. I'm sure from top to bottom, they're going to be able to kind of hold it down. And if they were to come into a situation, I would expect a second half response that would be closer to, I'm not saying exactly like, if they fall behind a little bit to Notre Dame, I would see them trying to be a little more like SMU's reaction in the second half of the ACC game than their own
Sure.
kind of like, kind of resigned, like we're going to still play well, but it doesn't look like it's going great. I wonder how much of this is also going to influence them, just going the energy of playing Notre Dame. I mean, everyone who plays Notre Dame, and Notre Dame fans will be the first to admit it. Everyone plays this like it's their Super Bowl. Fine, we get it. But truly, though, for Indiana, this is it. This is like, we get to show that we're the best team in this state. We get to, for probably the first time ever, surpass the vaunted Irish. Price. Well, okay, maybe before New Rockney, they might have had a better edge, but we're again, modern era stuff. This is fantastic, and I'm very curious to see, how again they respond to so much of this. Michigan was able to hold Indiana to 40 yards on the ground. Ohio State only allowed 85 yards on the ground, and Notre Dame's run defense is rested enough at this point to probably cause a similar result. Of course, Indiana managed to beat Michigan, and Michigan's certainly not the same team as Ohio State. But I wonder what we're going to see from the Hoosiers, especially if it is a snowier game, and the winter weather. You do tend to be a little more. Of course, hey, everyone will say the trick to winning in some of these snow environments is actually a quarterback who can pass a little bit in those environments. Some mid-range passes. Maybe Curtis Rourke is that kind of fellow. But I'm very curious to see how this offense does against, really, it's an offense-defense game in my mind. Not that it isn't always, but it's really, in my mind, that Indiana offense versus that Notre Dame defense is going to determine this thing.
No, I agree. And I want to draw your attention to a particular stat that has really been the key for Indiana this season, and that's early downs EPA. So what that means essentially is, what kind of success do you have on those early downs, right? On first and second down. On offense, Indiana is third in the country in early downs EPA. On defense, they're number 1 nationally in early downs EPA. Now, Notre Dame's defense is number 6 in the country. Notre Dame's offense is 22nd. So, still very good, but not elite the way that Indiana's is. For Indiana to pull this upset, they have to get themselves into second and manageable on both sides of the ball, right? You need to be in 2nd and 5 on offense. You need to be in 2nd and 8 on defense. Because again, that just opens up the playbook in both directions. It allows you to get aggressive. It allows you to go downfield. It allows you to take shots when you know that this can happen. I think that my greatest question for Indiana in this game is going to be, what kind of rushing consistency do we get? Because they are 6th nationally in offensive success, or in rushing success rate. But we saw against Michigan, we saw against Ohio State, this was not a team that dealt well with extreme physicality on the defensive line. And Notre Dame's better against the pass than they are against the run, so maybe that's an advantage for Indiana. That maybe this isn't an elite rush defense Notre Dame team, but I think that you still have to be worried about that, right? And so again, it's really going to come down to in so many ways, like who can take advantage of those margins. And like Notre Dame, I think has done just such a good job this year of grinding teams down on offense. They haven't been especially explosive or exciting, but like it's really been a. I mean, I think back to some of the Georgia teams in 21 and 22, where maybe 21 more than 22, where like the first half was basically just we're going to grind you, and then in the second half we're going to run away from you. I kind of feel like that's how this game is going to go. That Notre Dame is just going to grind them down. And then in the second half, a game that's maybe 14-10 turns into 27-10 in 6 minutes of game time.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see because obviously Indiana's had a pretty solid defense this whole season. Now,
Yes.
it kind of backfired. Well, not backfired, but they had clearly an approach they had to Ohio State, which was stopping the run, only to have Will Howard complete 80% of his passes. It's kind of like you can only that's the beauty of this sport. Sometimes somebody's just got a hot hand, and unfortunately for Indiana, he was the mid-range passing was just excellent and took away their overall control. But I'm curious to see how they can do against, because Riley Leonard's done pretty well. I mean, his last couple of games especially with Army and USC were excellent. Now, Army, was its own quirky thing. Also, to be fair, I think Notre Dame's run defense is a little skewed because they played Army and Navy, clobbered them both, but still allowed 200 yards in each of those games. It's just the way it is. But they also allowed
it is success rate, to be clear. It is success rate, but I do think that does impact success rate, that you're playing against two teams that are going to have success running the ball.
And NIU had obviously success running the ball. USC did too, but again, Notre Dame was able to get past just even that aspect of it. And USC's, oddly enough, had some impressive run games despite the actual win-loss records on the field. But I'm very curious to see Riley Leonard, especially after the USC game. I mean, he seems to be getting into his own, the type of transfer quarterback they were hoping they were going to get. This could be a real moment for him to also step up and make something going. And I'm curious to see, because both you and I in our last episode thought Notre Dame has a pretty reasonable path to make it to the championship game. Probably not win. Neither of us have them winning it, but perhaps just from the quirk of Georgia having the injury to Carson Beck and just the way the other seeds kind of went through, they seem to be stacking up favorably against most of these teams. I do wonder, though, if Riley Leonard is the part that we're going to, by the end of this, if they get even halfway that far, he's going to be the real reason why. And we're going to be talking about, like, yeah, that was Riley Leonard's, like, that's where he made his name. Like in the season, we're kind of like, oh, okay, whatever, but now this is the moment where he rose up at the highest possible stage, which amplified by Notre Dame's name, my goodness, then suddenly his transfer will have been worth every second of it. That right there.
So I want to real quick, before we make our pick, I want to pick an X factor for this game. And I more specifically want to pick an X factor for if Indiana's able to pull the upsets. What is the dynamic that makes that happen? And I think it's got to be Indiana's running game. And more specifically, I'm going to point to Indiana's offensive line. I spoke about them earlier this season. This is one of the units that Tom Allen left behind that was just pretty good to start. Like I think that they brought back 4 starters from last year's team. They added, I believe, 1 transfer from Wisconsin. There are other guys on this roster that were transfers, but they're multi-year transfers or guys who have been here more than 1 year. And they communicate really well. They have a really good idea of what they're supposed to be doing. They understand the scheme really well. But again, against Michigan and Ohio State, they were overmatched. I don't think it's a pure talent overmatched thing necessarily either, but like they just weren't used to seeing guys like that. So if I'm Indiana and I want to pull off this game, like we got to be grinding a lot of film of how Notre Dame wants to attack our offensive line. I think they have the bodies there to contend with a team like Notre Dame, but they're going to have to play their best game of the season for Indiana to have a chance to win this game. Who's your X factor?
I think you've actually hit the nail on the head. I mean, how much have they learned? Really, it's almost, I always tend to look at a mental aspect of this. How much have they learned from what went wrong at Ohio State? Can they stay in this game? It is a big stage, Ohio Stadium and Notre Dame Stadium. Now, Notre Dame Stadium is not as hostile as Ohio State Stadium isn't, as we've joked, even to its own team. But I mean, it's just not. I've been to both. You can't compare the two. I mean, my ears were literally ringing at the end of a game in Ohio Stadium, which I've never had happen in any stadium before. That said, I really want to see how they respond to just the pressure. I mean, because Notre Dame's maybe obviously no one's been in the first round of the playoff before, but Notre Dame's been in these situations before, let alone at home. Indiana, this is all still pioneering ground. They've got to be able to show that they can step up when they play a team like Notre Dame at home and not have the same kind of lost. I mean, again, not bad, but they can't expect making mental errors, special teams errors. They need to keep that all together. If they can keep mentally focused, stay error free, they'll have a shot in this game.
I agree. So with all that said, I'm thinking Notre Dame to win. I think they're just going to be too much. This feels like a late cover situation. I think the line is 7.5, or I can't remember if this is one of the bigger ones, because every one of the games this weekend, at least last I checked, had a line of a touchdown plus. Let me try to find this one. Okay, yeah, it's a 7-point line in favor of Notre Dame. My sort of bold prediction with this is that I do think that Indiana is going to have a very legitimate contingent of fans there. I think it's going to be much closer. I mean, again, we'll talk about the Tennessee Ohio State one, where Tennessee fans are apparently buying up a lot of tickets. I think Indiana could have an even more percentage-wise, an even bigger contingent, just because of the proximity and excitement for this game. So I do think Notre Dame wins. I think it's a late cover, and I think they move on to the next round.
Yeah, I just want to say the fact that the prices for this game were early on the most expensive indicates that, yeah, Indiana fans are trying to buy them up, and they're trying to fill that stadium. And wouldn't be the first time. I mean, I still remember, gosh, way back in like 2000, Nebraska visited Notre Dame Stadium, and it was infamous because they made the stadium red. Because again, you get people who really want to play. It's the Notre Dame Stadium. It's on that bucket list for a lot of folks. And it's cool. I've been there. It's neat. I recommend it. But all that said, yeah, I think this is going to be a cover for Notre Dame. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's going to be close in that first half, but we're going to start seeing the physicality of Notre Dame wear them down. And again, I think until I see otherwise, I still think this is a team that isn't used to it, and they're going to have some mental breaks that will cause turnovers or bad penalties, and it'll just be something where Notre Dame, despite that NIU loss, is just going to be methodical. They're going to be potentially actually one of the least sexy playoff teams when it comes down to it, because they're going to probably sail through winning games that aren't necessarily going to have some, oh my gosh, plays in them. They're just going to do it. And sometimes that's all it takes. The next morning, and again, it's interesting. There's so many factors in this one. We get the game, the other half of this particular bracket, which is SMU, the number 11 seed. They obviously lost that nail biter to the 12 seed, Clemson. They're heading over to Penn State. Lots has been said about this game. It's going to be in Happy Valley, Beaver Stadium. It's going to be cold. There might be a little snow here or there, but it won't be a lot of snow. But it's going to be in the mid-20s. SMU, bless their hearts. We talked about the weather in Dallas just a second ago. They're the team that is the oddest duck out in terms of going on the road. I mean, Tennessee, at least, what you could say, Knoxville's a little bit, they get cold in that area, but
it's a little chillier. You got a lot of people in the mountains, right?
Like, yeah, those Ozark.
There's more access to cold out there than there is down here. It's flat as hell down here. And by the way, while it's not supposed to rain on game day, not supposed to snow on game day, there is snow the day before that could still be on the ground when the game happens. I don't know. I mean, I know some stadiums do. I don't know if Penn State would. Like, do you think that they would have a heated field?
I love that question, because most stadiums don't in college, and I'll tell you why. The Gopher Stadium here is a good example. When they first built it, they didn't put in a heated field because the college football season for regular games ends in like Thanksgiving weekend. So rarely would it get that cold. Mostly, the bigger concern actually isn't snow; it's freezing the ground. And then
Sure.
it becomes like, because for those who may not remember, the Metrodome roof popped at one point, so they had to actually
Yeah,
move the
yeah.
Vikings in, and then Brett Favre got a concussion because his head hit a frozen ground playing in what was then TCF Bank Stadium. So when they officially demolished Metrodome and built the U.S. Bank Stadium that's there now, the Vikings paid to have the field heated. So now that stadium actually has a heated field. That said, same reasoning. Why would Penn State have a heated field? They never play past November. Historically. And now suddenly we're talking about these, because I mean, again, if you're in the Big Ten championship, you're in a dome in Indianapolis. It's not a big deal. So it will still be cold. They're competent. They'll clear the snow off for the most part. But yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to factor into it. It shouldn't be as cold, though, to freeze the ground. That's when it gets a little bit
Yeah.
more nerve
It's
wracking.
not going to be. It's going to probably be mid to low 20s. Like you said, I imagine that they're going to clear the field. It's probably lucky overall that it's the like noon game, so you should get the best heat overall. I also think that so one thing that happened over the offseason is that Penn State is apparently investing like $700 million to winterize the stadium, partially in anticipation for more games like this. So I do think that I imagine that they don't have a heated field right now. I wouldn't be shocked if they have one down the road. But it's yeah, I mean it's gonna be interesting. I looked, and the difference in the high temperatures in State College versus Dallas that day, it's 30 degrees difference when you talk about that, which like isn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be, but like again, we don't know exactly how it's gonna be. And by the way, when SMU's leaving their stadium or leaving their hotel room rather, it's probably going to be like 15 degrees outside, and it's not just Texas kids. A lot of kids on SMU's roster transferred with Rhett Lashley from Miami. So like it's like a total, like this is by far the most like ooh what what's a polar bear doing in Arlington, Texas type of stuff, except the opposite of it. What's Arlington, Texas doing in the North Pole?
But most of these kids want to go to the league. You better get used to it. Some of these stadiums you might hear are outdoors.
I don't know. It's every place is trying to make their stadium indoor now. Even Chicago's trying to do it now.
Oh my
so I don't
goodness.
know. You might not need to get used to it ever.
So this is fun. So obviously, I heard one of these kind of previews for the game I was reading, like, this is Penn State's first time in the college football playoff. I'm like, well, SMU too, I mean, but but this is exciting. This is the moment. There's so much just psychology going into this because we always said the teams that were going to benefit the most from this were going to be from the expanded playoff were Penn State and Ole Miss. Ole Miss didn't quite make it this time, so this time it's Penn State to carry the mantle for both these two teams that always kind of finish just outside. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride in the playoff. But the question is, will they do enough to move forward? Now, Penn State, they are used to going to bowls. They've been fine. I didn't realize Franklin is like 6-6 in bowl games. 4-5 4-5 at Penn State. SMU hasn't won a bowl game since actually the Hawaii Bowl back in 2012. I didn't realize that. They've gone 0-4 since. Now, obviously, Rhett Lashley, different era. He hasn't won a bowl game, I believe, at SMU. I think he's also 0-2. Very curious, though, just once it gets down to it, how they're going to match up. I mean, Kevin Jennings, lively arm, dynamic playmaker, got to a slow start against Clemson. And they were able to, but at the same time, like, he giveth and he taketh away and he giveth. I mean, he also was a reason why that was one of the most incredible near comebacks we've ever seen in college football in the second half of that ACC title game. Very curious to see how he and his team are going to do against probably the most physical team they've ever seen. Am I wrong to think that? I don't think they've ever dealt with a team that plays with the kind of power Penn State does.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably fair to say. I'm trying to think back, like, I mean, obviously, like Clemson historically is that kind of team. They're probably not this year. Yeah, I mean, you have to go back for sure to get to really have one that's comparable. Because during their run, it's mostly been TCU, it's been AAC teams, right? So I think it's fair to say that Penn State is probably the most physical team that they've played, at least in this like period of success, starting with Sonny Dykes in 2018-19.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I'm very curious to see if they can get him to settle in, get him to click. You know, I don't know if they can get any kind of run game going. I'm very curious to see, they can't really, because this goes to my concern. I don't think they can just line up and kind of just keep hammering away at that Nittany Lions front. It'll probably not work as well. Now, defense, obviously, we've talked about that. SMU's defense is really the part that no one really talks about. And for all the issues, all the scoring, it's usually because the offense keeps turning it over with short fields. It's not the defense's fault. They can only do so much. So they bring pressure from all sides. We'll expect to see potential for tackles for losses. But that offensive line may be able to pick them up pretty well. I just don't know if they'll be able, how they will do against an offensive line for Penn State that has been pretty good. And we're going to see, as we said before, I'm very curious to see Drew Aller and all of this. After he said he's coming back, this is a meaningful game. Not that it wasn't before, but this is an extra meaningful game. He is still building up what he hopes will be an NFL caliber resume. You got Andy Kolnicki back there. Very curious to see if also we can see some creativity from him. Hopefully he wasn't too distracted by the West Virginia kind of side story there, whether he was going to be one of the candidates there. But very curious to see how these guys match up. It really is. I hate to say it's a quarterback battle, but I'm more intrigued by these quarterbacks only because of the storylines. I wouldn't have cared as much about Drew Aller until the fact that he was coming back. Suddenly I'm much more invested in this.
I'll be honest. I think that's I don't know why you'd care more now that he's coming back, but no, I do think that
me. I'm a Drew Aller booster. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
How many times before have I been like?
Well, and I want to be clear too, right? Like, I think that Aller and Kotelnicki have built like a perfect marriage of quarterback and the thing too though is like, I think Kotelnicki's one of the best in the game right now at drawing up plays. Like, I think he would have been a fantastic hire at West Virginia or any number of schools, to be quite honest. I think, though, that where my question is how much of Aller's success and the Penn State offense's success are just like drawing up awesome ball plays as opposed to like pure ability. Now, Aller has pure ability. I want to be clear about that. It's more the rest of that offense that I'm not 100% sure about. This Penn State running game has been good, but like they had like Nick Singleton was the number one running back in the class of 2022. Katron Allen was like another top 70 player. They don't run the ball at that level, right? Like you'd feel like it would be closer to like being one of the elite rushing offenses in the country. They are quite consistent. Again, when you talk about offensive success rate, they are 13th. But like from a success rate perspective, they're better passing than they are running, which is like not what you'd expect from this team. So I think the question for me, and the reason that I think that SMU is going to have a chance in this game, is because I wonder how these two offenses and these two teams handle being out of structure. I think that these defenses are good enough to make things complicated and difficult at times. And I just don't know how much I trust Penn State outside of structure. Like, again, they have some of the best structure in all of college football because they have one of the best offensive staffs in all of college football. But like, I don't think we've seen Drew Aller have to extend plays a lot to make stuff happen with his feet with consistency. I don't think they have the receivers to bail them out for stretches. Now, again, probably the most likely success for Penn State is probably just pounding the ball over and over and over again with their running game and just trying to wear down SMU and hold on to the ball and not let Kevin Jennings and Brashard Smith touch the ball. I don't know if that's how this team is built right now, though. Like, they're kind of built to be more pass heavy and explosive and use a lot of misdirection. And when you're SMU and you've got a really good defensive coordinator in Scott Simons, I think that you have a little bit more time to prepare for that than you do in other aspects. So, look, I might be totally off base. Penn State might be able to come out and blow this game away with especially their physicality. But like, this also isn't Penn State's best defense that they've had under James Franklin. Like, when you look success rate, they're 19th. They're specifically 37th against the rush from a success rate perspective. I don't know that that's all that scary. Now, they have one of the great edge rushers in all of college football in Abdul Carter. Like, he is probably the best player in this entire game, to be quite honest. But like I kind of like SMU's secondary right now more than I like Penn State's. Isaiah Nokobia is a player who's been I think a 3-year starter for them back there. Jonathan McGill has started for 3 years at power conference schools. Like they've got some legit players back there at safety. SMU does, along with some of the pass rushers and edge rushers that they have as well. So it's kind of a question of like what wins out, having individual playmakers, which SMU has, or just like a body of work like Penn State has. And I don't know. I think it's going to be closer than maybe it should be.
Yeah, it could be. I'm going to be honest. When it comes down to it, I'm making my pick based off of how I think Abdul Carter and company are going to be in terms of disrupting the passing game. I mean, SMU struggled with the pass rush of Clemson for much of that game. You know, they were flushing Jennings out of the pocket. I think that it's a tougher pass rush with Penn State. I think, especially being in that environment, being in Happy Valley. Now, it's not going to be the same as a maximum like nighttime whiteout. But I do think that in the end, that is going to be a deciding factor because, as we've seen, SMU can make inopportune turnovers. And if they start to let that happen here, Penn State's going to take advantage of it. They may not throw up a lot of points, but they will control the game and keep it moving. And they are competent enough, I think, to make them win. So therefore, I'm actually taking Penn State on this. And I think they'll win by a comfortable margin. They'll certainly beat the spread.
I'll take SMU. I'll make it interesting. I picked them in my bracket last week, but it's going to be an interesting game. And again, like I mentioned with the Indiana Notre Dame game, there's a chance that like the weather just impacts SMU's passing game in a way that Penn State is much more easily able to take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. This is playing to Penn State's strengths as far as weather is concerned. Well, when we get back from the break, we'll take a look at the other two first-round games here on the College Football Survivor Show.
The College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line.
All right, so now we're moving to Saturday afternoon. The first of the second two games, I believe I think the Penn State game and the Clemson Texas game are both on TNT. Am I right? I mean, I'm actually looking forward to seeing that more than anything else. That is actually is another intrigue that is just purely on aesthetics and kind of curiosity on how that's going to roll. But we're going to have a game, the one that is going to be in the warmer weather climate of Clemson heading over to Darrell K. Royal Stadium, Texas Stadium in Austin for the only game that isn't in Eastern time. It's actually going to be 3 p.m. Central time. Not a huge difference between 3 and 4. I'm curious to see how this one shapes up. Clemson, as we've said before, despite being the 12 seed, obviously they got in by winning the ACC championship game. And they're not what people thought when people thought the 12 seed was going to be last season's Liberty. This is actually a team that has had moments. Obviously, it's had bad moments. This is their opportunity, truly. As much as the ACC title game was neat, I think this is going to be the moment where people are going to see how much improvement has happened since that Georgia game. Because they dropped one to Louisville. Yeah, they dropped one to South Carolina, but those were kind of buried in all the other games going on those particular days. I mean, anything happening on rivalry weekend was totally overshadowed by what happened in Ohio Stadium. It's the way it is sometimes. But this is going to be an interesting opportunity for Clemson to see, because I am still not the biggest believer in Texas at this point, only because they certainly performed better than I expected against Georgia. But then again, in the second time against Georgia, I should say. But then again, Georgia, I'm not even sure where Georgia is in all of this, because they just had that 8 overtime victory over Georgia Tech the previous week. So I am wondering how I don't know, is Tennessee the SEC team I'm most interested in seeing this season? I'm not sure. In this playoff bracket, I'm not sure. But I just think,
not me.
Well, I know, not you, but I wonder which of these SEC teams is the one that has an opportunity to get far, and I'm not sure Texas is going to do as well as people think against the Clemson team. And I know Texas is favored. I know it's in DKR, but I think Clemson, this is the type of situation where I could see them surprising. Because again, Cade Klubnik's been a decent quarterback the rest of the season. They've got a good wide receiver. They've got a decent defense. They're not where they were a few years ago, or more at this point, but I think they've got what it takes. I think they can make something out of this game. I think they certainly have a chance to make it a close one, if not the outright upset.
You know what's interesting is that I feel like a lot of this conversation that we should have and are going to have about Clemson, Texas is actually very similar to the one about SMU Penn State. Like, which is funny because I think that both of us are turning up on other sides of each debate. Because with Clemson, you've got a team with a quarterback that can just make plays, with a defense that's pretty tough. With Penn State and Texas, you're talking about a defense that's really tough and really physical. And offensively, you're talking about a team that's had some struggles at times. Now, I think the Texas defense is I think it might be the best in the country. It's them or Ohio State. From a net point per drive perspective, Texas is the number one defense in the country. From an EPA margin perspective, they've got the number 3 defense in the country. Like, they are really, really good. And they're especially good against the pass. And Clemson hasn't been all that consistent running the ball this year. Now, the thing that they do have is Cade Klubnik, and I alluded to it last show. So Cade Klubnik and Quinn Ewers have quite a history. So they were both originally members of the class of 2022, and Quinn Ewers coming out of Texas, and I'll have a story on this on Thursday for CBSSports.com. But he was kind of considered the golden child, right? Like, I spoke to one recruiting analyst who was like, look, just the reality was I came out and saw him throw as an 8th grader. And then I was like, this guy might be the number 1 overall recruit in his class. Like, that's how early it was, like, obvious that this was going to happen. And Cade Klubnik was kind of a late riser. Now, he played in a fantastic system at Westlake High School, the same one that Drew Brees and Nick Foles and Sam Ehlinger all came through. And so he eventually comes through. He has a great camp circuit before his senior year. He ultimately elevates himself to being the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2022 after Quinn Ewers reclassifies to 2021. These two players played in the 2021 6A state title games, a game, by the way, that I was at, which is kind of crazy to think about now. So, like, there are a lot of storylines between these two guys coming into the game. Cade Klubnik is from Austin. He was never a priority by Texas staff. So, like, it's a lot going on there. I think that the other piece of this too, right, is like, at this point in both their careers, Klubnik is clearly the gamer of the two, right? Like, Quinn Ewers has all the traits, has all the skills. I think he's a really good player, but like, Cade Klubnik is the type who just makes stuff happen over and over and over again. I mean, he's the reason that they're in the college football playoff because of some of the plays that he made late in games. So that playmaking, I think, is real. I think it will matter. I just think that Texas right now, like, I think that Clemson has the ability to give Texas a scare. Absolutely. And when I look at the matchup, though, that I think will decide this game and that I'm worried about Clemson about, it's that they are not one of the better rush defenses in the country this year. This is the worst rush defense that they've had basically since they've elevated themselves to being a national program under Dabo Swinney. When you look at their rushing stats, right, like, they are allowing the 73rd most rushing yards per game, over 150 per game, 4.6 yards per carry. And for Texas, the key to taking away Texas offense is to stifle the run. That's what Georgia's done so successfully that nobody else was able to do, was they made them one-dimensional. And when you make them one-dimensional, I don't think that their receivers are anywhere near as elite as they were the past 2 years. And I think you can take advantage of that. And obviously, Quinn Ewers has been prone to mistakes when that happens. I worry that Clemson can't do that. I'm worried that they don't have the players right now to take away Texas' run game with their front. If I'm wrong, I think that that's where this game changes, but I'm worried that I'm not.
I think that is the biggest concern. As much as I am fully admit, I will drop my own facade. I am rooting for Clemson, not because I care about Texas losing or anything like that. I think this is a surprising opportunity to really shake people's perception of the seeding. Where, the 12 seed's automatically going to lose. Well, what if the 12 seed actually wins? It's going to make people a lot more excited. And maybe I'm actually setting up even more vociferous arguments next season about who gets in. If Clemson did that, well, Alabama should have, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, though, part, and it isn't just a total, shot in the dark. I am still a little concerned about Texas. I don't know if their tests, they haven't passed the toughest tests, and this would be the time they get to pass. And arguably, I'm not going to say that this Clemson team is up to Georgia, even with the injuries, but you never know. You never know. So I'm going to say Cade Klubnik is going to be the reason why Clemson pulls an upset in DKR, and just everyone's going to be, Dabo's just going to give the smuggest conference we're ever going to hear after that game.
Yeah, if you're a fan of press conferences, you should be rooting for Clemson to win this game, because that would be an all-timer if that happens. I don't know if they have the horses, but like, can you imagine? And by the way, I don't know if people realize this, Dabo just took his first transfer. His first real transfer just committed 2 days ago. So, like, this is a new year, new me kind of Dabo performance if he wins this game. He's gonna go on a tear. I don't think it's gonna happen. I think Texas is gonna win this game.
I think that's fair. Do you think by how much? I mean, do you think it's not even gonna be close?
Well, I think that Texas offense has a lot of issues still. So I don't know that they even right now have the ability to put the hammer down on a team. Like, so I think that it probably is a 10-point win. I think that it's probably like 27-17. I think that Clemson will be able to move the ball. Now, the thing is, it could be a 27-17 that really just was never close. I think that that's in the cards, but I don't think the final score will look all that good, because I just don't think that Texas is going to score a ton of points in this playoff.
Well, certainly if this game ends up being close, there's going to be some people tuning into TNT late before the next game starts, and that's the evening game, the nightcap. 8 p.m. Eastern local time. Again, I guess we just love kicking off late. Tennessee, number 9, the closest seeding, again at number 8, Ohio State in Ohio Stadium. We've talked about this one. It's going to be cold, not awful, but it's going to be cold. But certainly the vibe in all of this one is the last we saw the Buckeyes, it was not a great moment for them on the same field. It would be funny if Tennessee kind of jokingly ran out onto the field and started to playfully pretend like they're about to plant, like before the game even starts. I want to see the Tennessee players go in and jokingly plant something just to make them lose their minds. Like a psychology game there, But my biggest concern is Tennessee has a solid enough defense. I agree. I'm a little skeptical about the offense overall. It just hasn't produced much. They have a great running back. They got a quarterback who needs at least another year back there. But all that said, Ohio State can sometimes play the wrong way at their opponent. I mean, if they play as dumb as they did against Michigan, that will be a whole other kettle of fish. But I'm just concerned. What if Tennessee maybe gets a score early, not a lot, like 3 points, 7 points, and Ohio State's offense just can't quite get there yet? Maybe they're still grinding on that defense, and they'll eventually blow it up in the second half. At what point is there concern that a stadium that is already, I mean, when the university president says we're expecting 30% Tennessee fans, in my mind, that's a conservative estimate. That means, we're going to see half the stadium. I'm not saying it's going to be half, but I mean, it's going to be a loud, vociferous, the Vol Nation is going to be there. And I am curious, at what point do some of the Ohio State fans start kind of going along with the, let's just, not root for Tennessee, but kind of get angry at the team that's before them on the field. And it's a night game, so it's not like we're going to get the people that haven't quite had a chance to perhaps imbibe a little bit too much before the game. We're going to have some loud fans in that stadium, and as I've said, I've been to a night game there. It is quite a hostile environment. Woo! It could be something else, and I'm very curious to see how that's gonna develop out there. To me, that's almost like the biggest storyline, more than what's going on in the field, is how are the fans going to react?
Yeah, I'm really curious. I mean, look, I think that one of the things, though, is like, this is a 105,000 seat stadium, right? So, like, you're talking like 40,000 individual Tennessee fans needing to buy tickets. I mean, that's still a lot. I still am a little skeptical that it's actually going to be like a true takeover. Now, I think that there will be a very legitimate Tennessee contingent. I think that they're, I would not be surprised if it's 20%, right? Like, I think that 20,000, 25,000, I think it's going to look a little more like that, which would be huge. Like, it would be like legitimate cheering sections for Tennessee when things go right. The thing for me, though, that I keep coming back to is, like, what's Tennessee going to do offensively against this team? They've got no receivers who scare you. They don't have a quarterback who scares you. So it's kind of like all on Dylan Sampson, who's an awesome running back, to basically carry you alone against one of the best defenses that we've seen the past couple of years. And I just don't love that, man. Like, I just don't love that matchup. Tennessee will hit on an explosive play. It'll probably be, I think there's a chance that they hit an explosive play touchdown, like a 70-plus yard touchdown. But the other piece too is that Tennessee offensively is built to do exactly the opposite of what Michigan wants to do offensively. Michigan is comfortable holding onto the ball, grinding it out. Like they want to they want to average 3.3 yards per play and get a first down every 3 plays. Tennessee wants to go 60 yards on every single play. If they miss on those plays, and again, like I've watched it close up. I was at Baylor in the mid 2010s. When you're not hitting on those plays and when you don't have playmakers, which I don't think Tennessee has right now, I don't really know the pathway to them putting up consistent offense. And my other issue with them too is if they do struggle, how quickly are they getting off the field? Right? Like how I don't think that time of possession alone is an issue in a football game these days, but like I do think that plays add up. And I do think that when you are playing, let's say that Tennessee runs 60 plays. If Ohio State's running 85 against your defense and you're running 60 and you hold the ball for 21 minutes and Ohio State has it for 39 minutes, I think you can start to run into trouble there. And look, a lot of this, and I picked Ohio State to win the national championship in the preseason, midseason, and just now. Like I'm committed to the bit. But I think that one of my questions too is like, and probably my greatest assumption that could be proven wrong is I think that Ryan Day heading into that Michigan game was of the opinion we have to win our way. That's how we prove ourselves. We win our way. And that's by running right into Mason Graham for some reason. Well, I don't think that Ohio State has the right anymore to say we're going to win our way. You just have to win. You just have to do whatever it takes and find a way to win. And I feel very confident there are way more answers on this Ohio State roster than there are on Tennessee's roster. Now, will the coaching staff pick those answers? That's kind of the fundamental question that we've got here. But I mean, I just when they're backed up against the wall, and Ryan Day, like, look, here's the reality. Here's like serious reality. If Tennessee has 40% of the crowd because of apathy from the Ohio State fan base, and then they lose in the first round, like, I think that Ryan Day will actually not be back next year. Like, I think that he actually could get fired. I think that that's the pathway to this happening, is not just losing, but very visibly losing the fan base along the way. I do feel like, we've had this conversation forever. I think that it could look more like, hey, go search for NFL opportunities. Hey, like do something else. I don't think it's going to necessarily be like, here's your buyout, go away. I don't know if it's going to look like that. But I do think that if Tennessee does have a strong presence in this stadium and Ohio State gets embarrassed in this first game, which any loss to me would be getting embarrassed in this first game, I think that is actually the end of the Ryan Day tenure. And I think that he probably realizes that.
See, I know he probably realizes that, although now I'm imagining him getting fired, and then we're going to see Ohio State really actually forget the buyout, just go after Bill Belichick immediately. But
Oh my gosh.
that would be the off-season drama that we would like. It would somehow match what we had last season with Nick Saban and Harbaugh leaving it so late and all of it. But
what if Ohio State gets Sean McVay?
Oh, man. But all of that said, I am just, I agree. Ohio State is a supremely talented team. And this kind of goes back to, this is a different version of my issue with Texas. Texas is also a supremely talented team, but sometimes you're just not the team that's a little bit, there's sometimes a team with the things go their way the right way. But in terms of Ohio State, I still think of moments I've seen where great teams just fall apart. And I'm not sure if they can get past this Tennessee team. I'm a lot more, oddly enough, somehow I feel better about their chances with Oregon, only because Oregon will be rested. Ohio State will be back on track and they'll be focused. I'm just thinking if there is a chance for Ohio State to falter right now, Tennessee's got the best one. They're motivated. They're happy to, like, as we said, 3 weeks ago, they thought they weren't in this. Now they're in it, and now they get a chance to. I'm not saying they have everyone has a chance to win it all, but they get through this first game. That's going to be a triumphant season for Tennessee. They have more to fight for. Ohio State, even if they get through this game, the expectations are the championship. So it's going to be just another step in what feels like what is a way more stressful jury process than it should be, but it's just, I think, the Ohio State mentality right now. So I am going to also have a little bit of fun here. I am thinking Tennessee is going to just, if anything, Tennessee isn't going to win it. Ohio State's going to lose it, and they're going to lose it just because they are in their heads. They just can't get focused. And Ryan Day, the 1,000-yard stare we saw at the end of the Michigan game was a symbol of something bigger that's going on with him. And he's going to be like, you know what? I need a break.
31-13, Ohio State.
Okay.
That's my pick.
All right.
It's not going to be close.
We'll see here. You're the one who guaranteed Michigan was going to lose.
I did. Ryan Day keeps finding new lows. You don't have to remind me.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to thank all of y'all for listening out there. We're looking forward to seeing these first round games as much as you are, as well as all the other games in between. There's games going on right now. I think, well, not yet, but I know the Boca Raton Bowl is about to kick off in a little bit. Lots of games going on. Check out the Gasparilla Bowl, just as my own personal plug there. I want to thank you all for listening. I want to thank our producer, Joey Aliberti. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on X and TikTok at CFP Survivor Show. He's Shehan Jayaraja. Please read his work on CBSSports.com. He writes great stuff. As you mentioned, he's got a great story coming up on Thursday. And you can also find him at Shehan Jayaraja on X and TikTok. I'm Bobak Kyrie, part of the group that runs our CFP, the home of college football on Reddit, and at Reddit CFP, wherever you can find us on social media. Thanks for listening, everyone.
The College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line.